In this video, we're going to continue working with parallel lines cut by a transversal, but the difference is you're not going to see that diagram as easily. So if you look at like example 1, you don't really see two parallel lines cut by a transversal. Same thing with example 2 and example 3. So what we're going to focus on is something called an auxiliary line, and what that means is we're going to add in a line, ray, or segment that's going to be used to create those two parallel lines cut by a transversal. If you recall, the other day we talked about, here's my two parallel lines, and then we had our transversal, and then we can identify alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, corresponding angles, same side interior. But when we look at these pictures here, we don't have this as clear cut. We don't just see our two parallel lines in our transversal. So what our goal is going to be is to create these auxiliary lines that are going to be lines that are added to our original diagram to be able to help complete these problems and to be able to come up with these two parallel lines cut by a transversal so that we can use those different types of angles that we've already talked about. So when we look at this first example, this dotted line here is considered the auxiliary line. It's not really there, it's something that we're adding in so that we can solve the problem. So this is considered the auxiliary line. So if we look, once you imagine that line, and you imagine, so you have this parallel line, and we add this line such that it's parallel to this original line. Now hopefully you see we have that two parallel lines being cut by a transversal. So hopefully you're seeing that. You might need to turn your paper sideways if it makes it easier to visually see this picture right here. So we have this parallel line, the first one that's given to us, and when we create this auxiliary line, we're constructing it so that it is parallel to the original. So now I see my two parallel lines, I see my transversal, I see the Z shape right here. So that means these two angles right here have to be congruent because they're alternate interior. They're in the inside and opposite sides of the transversal. So I'm going to write these reasons down as I use them. So my first reason here is that if I have parallel lines, that means I have congruent alternate interior angles. So that makes both of those 41. And now if you look at what we're trying to find, we're trying to find angle W, which is this entire angle. So right now, angle E is this small portion. That's 41 degrees. What I want to find now is this small portion F so that I can use my angle addition postulate to add the two parts together to get the whole angle. So now if you look, using my auxiliary line, and using this as my second parallel line, now if I look at this line as my transversal, well now I have this Z shape formed right here, which means I have another set of alternate interior angles. So here's the Z shape. Remember, look for that Z shape or look at the interior opposite sides of the transversal. So I have 35 here and 35 here. So same reasoning, parallel lines being cut by transversal means the alternate interior angles are congruent. So if one's 35, the other one's 35. So then to find the measure of angle W, I'm going to add up the two parts. So I have 41 from one angle and 35 from the other. And together, that gives me 76. So that's my answer. So remember, creating these auxiliary lines is just making it so that we have this picture right here. Because this is our end goal. We need that picture so that we can use the angles that we already know about. We can use those alternate interior, alternate exterior. So really, that's what you want to look for. You want to look at how can I draw in this new line that's parallel to my given lines that'll help me create this picture. So if you look at this next example, I have two parallel lines and I don't have a transversal between those. Because remember, a transversal has to intersect both of those in order to be considered the transversal for those parallel lines. So what I'm seeing is if I draw in a parallel line that goes through this point right here, that'll make these two pieces transversals. So let me just show you and then we'll talk about it. Just going to adjust this a little bit. So using a straight edge is helpful here. So basically, what I've done now is there's one parallel line, here's another if I were to extend it out. So again, extending it is like saying an auxiliary line, you're adding to it. And same thing with this, I can extend out. So really what I've created now is I have this line and I have this line, and I have this transversal right here. So imagine here's your diagram. You have this line here and you have this line, and now you have this transversal. So you're trying to get angle H, which now you have this part inside with the 162. So those are in the interior of these two parallel lines. So these are actually same side interior angles, which means I have to add to 180. So that means I can, let me go ahead and write that. So I'm going to say parallel lines imply supplementary same side interior angles. So that means if I do 180 minus the 162, that's going to give me that part. So that's going to give me 18 degrees. So this little part here is 18 degrees. And then if I continue this process, but if I do it with the bottom half of the picture, so if I look at, here's my parallel line on the bottom, here's that auxiliary line I created, these are parallel to each other, because remember we created that line so that's parallel. Now I look at, this is my transversal, and I have this portion of angle H is what I'm trying to find. Well, that portion is with relationship to 98 degrees. Those are same side interior angles again, so that must mean that they're supplementary. So the relationship between the angle we don't know and the angle we have is that they're same side interior. So that means these have to add to 180, and it's going to be my same reason. So that means I'm just going to continue this. So I have 180 minus the 98, and that gives me 82. So then that means this angle right here is 82. So then now I know that I have 18 degrees and 82 degrees. Well, now we can just add those up. So now I want to know this whole angle right here. I'm just going to add those up. So the measure of angle H is 18 plus 82 degrees, which is going to equal 100. So that's your final answer. So the trickiest part of these is knowing how to draw that auxiliary line. So you're probably thinking that, which is totally fine, because that is the trickiest part. How do you know where you're supposed to draw that? So really the strategy is just look to see where you have parallel lines already and try to extend those, try to draw in those transversals, and maybe you need to draw in another parallel line so that you create this picture up top here. Our end goal is to create that picture so that we can use the angles that they give us. So once you've created that picture, then you start looking at, well, how do I use the angle that's given to me? What does that match up to with what I'm trying to find? So I looked at the 98 and I'm trying to find this portion. So what kind of angles are those? They're same side interior. Same thing with this 162, trying to find that angle. What do they make? Same side interior angles. Where when I was in the first problem, this angle was the 41 given to me, and I had to ask myself what I was trying to find. I was trying to find this portion E so that I could find W, so those are alternate interior. So that's kind of what I'm running through as I'm doing these. So let's try a couple more. So this next one, again, the first step is always to figure out your parallel lines and start trying to get some transversals in there. You might not have to draw in another parallel line. In this one, when I look at it, I don't have a bigger angle that's getting divided from different pieces, or it's going to end up equaling the sum of the different parts. Like these two pictures, like angle H was going to be two parts added together. In this picture, all my angles are made up of basically smaller pieces. So I have two parallel lines. So let's just go ahead and extend those and go from there. So if I extend this out and I extend this out, remember you're trying to create that picture where you have your parallel lines and a transversal. So right here, I see a transversal. So now if I look at just the blue picture, I have a 92 and I have some letters over here. I have a letter over here. Well, I'm not going to look at letter M because it's not part of the transversal that I've just drawn in. So that tells me I'm probably going to do that after the fact. So if I look at 92, if I look at that and I look at J and K, well, these two angles are same side interior, so those are going to be supplementary, but it's not this entire or it's this entire angle, not just K. So I can't just say 180 minus 92 and get K, because it's actually this 92 with this entire thing adds to 180. So I'm not going to actually use that. I'm going to look at J though, because when I look at J, see how you have the Z shape? It's kind of extended out. That means that J is going to be congruent to that. So J is going to be 92. So I'm going to write that out. And those are called alternate interior angles. So parallel lines imply congruent alternate interior angles. So that means the measure of angle J is going to equal 92. So there's my first step. And then from there, I can find angle K because I'm seeing right here that I have 180 degrees between those. So that's probably not the best choice of marker. So 180 degrees between all of those angles. So for the second piece here, I'm going to say angles that form a line add to 180. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 180 degrees and I'm going to subtract off the two angles I have. So the 92 and the 46. And you could have also said 92 plus K plus 46 equals 180. This is just quicker, but same answer. So when I do that, I end up getting 42. So that tells me that the measure of angle K is 42. And then to find the third letter, I'm going to look at the other transversal here. So now I'm going to say, well, here's my parallel lines. And here's my transversal. So hopefully you're seeing the use of color, how helpful it can be to really understand these diagrams. So here's my parallel lines. Now I'm looking at the pink as my transversal, and I'm trying to relate the M, because that's what I'm trying to find, with the 46. So this M with the 46. So because those are the only ones that are actually touching this transversal. K touches the transversal, but it's only a portion of K. So you want to be looking at M and 46. So those angles are alternate interior because they form the Z shape. So those have to be congruent. So that means for the third piece here, I can say parallel lines imply congruent alternate interior angles as my reason. Remember, you should be writing out these reasons as you're doing these. This is your justification. This is why this is true. So the measure of angle M is going to be equal to 46. So that's kind of like your work for it. And then the last one here, you have, again, a situation where I have two sets of parallel lines this time, and I see that this could possibly be my transversal. So one step at a time here, highlight and extend the parallel lines. So let's highlight and extend the ones that are parallel. So those two are parallel. And then here's my transversal. So when I look at that, I'm looking at the Q as something I'm trying to find because that's an angle formed by those two parallel lines in the transversal, and 94. So those angles, what's the relationship between them? Because those are angles that are formed by those two pink lines. See how the 68 touches this side of the pink, but it's not it's not the entire angle formed, because 68 is really formed by this pink part and this segment right here. That's why I'm not really worrying about it. I'm not using it. Same thing for the P. So instead, I look at the Q and I look at the 94. Those angles are actually corresponding angles. If you take the Q and you slide it down, they match up. So those are going to be congruent to each other. So parallel lines imply congruent corresponding angles. So that means that angle Q, the measure of angle Q, is going to be equal to 94. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the other two parallel lines. So now let's use a different color, highlight over these two parallel lines. And then I still have this as my transversal. So here's my double arrows to represent that those are parallel to each other, but not parallel to the originals. So now I look at the 68 because now that's an angle that's formed by those two blue lines. So the angle that's formed by the blue lines and this angle right here would have to be equal because those are corresponding angles. So I could say that this is 68. So then how does that help me get P? Well, now I see right here that I have 180 degrees because I have a straight line or a straight angle between the 94, the P, and the 68. So I marked my corresponding angles using the blue, and now I'm going to say that I have angles that form a straight line, add to 180. So to finish up the problem here, I'm going to do 180 degrees minus what I have, 94 and 68. Keep in mind you could do 94 plus P plus 68 equals 180 and then solve for P. Same thing. This is just a little bit shorter. And when I do that, I get 18. So that means the measure of angle P is going to be 18 degrees. So those are the ways that I've found to solve these problems. Those aren't the only ways though. Some of you might look at this 68 and you might think, oh, well, I'm going to label that in the alternate exterior angle. You might label that right here because this is 68. Alternate exterior. And then you might say, okay, well, this angle and this angle have to form a straight line, but then you also have this piece over here. So then maybe you find that piece to be 18, and then that angle and this angle are vertical angles, getting 18. So that's another option. So when you're doing these problems, there's often more than one method to do them. It's just whatever you see. But using highlighters and marking these diagrams up with color is going to be really helpful so that you're seeing that two parallel lines cut by a transversal picture, and then hopefully that'll help you identify these. So try the practice problems, do your best, try to do the best you can with marking those parallel lines in the transversal, extending things so that you can get different angles that are formed, though alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding, same side interior, and try to solve the problems the best you can.